Thank you, Cheryl. And hey, everyone. Thanks for joining today. It's a pleasure to be here. For those of you who I haven't met before, I'm Horace Wu. I am the founder and CEO of Syntheia. I used to be a transactional lawyer once upon a time. Not anymore, not very good at it anymore. Been out of the game for about 7 years because we've been building this company for the last five. Um, what we are solving at Syntheia is the problem that transactional lawyers have whenever they are dealing with new documents, third-party documents, drafting, negotiating, etc. There's now a lot of tools that are getting into the space of how do we help you draft legal documents. And the way we approach it at Syntheia is we see it as a broader problem than just drafting. We see it as a content problem. We see it as a knowledge problem. So when we talk to lawyers, how we explain our technology is we help you figure out what might be wrong with your documents and also help you figure out what you can do about it based on the work that you've done before. And so in our platform, there's actually multiple what we call mini apps that are tailored for different users and different personas and what they're trying to solve for. And so I'm going to be showing you a few of these mini apps as we go through, but really the core idea behind it is what do transactional lawyers do? A lot of the time, it's drafting contracts, it's negotiating contracts, and a lot of that work leans on their own knowledge. And how do we boost that knowledge? How do we give them the ammunition they need when they go into a negotiation, or the ammunition and the certainty they need when they're revising a contract? So I'll talk you through like one of these workflows that people always have, and I'll then go into the specifics and different use cases we've been solving for. And one of the things that we always get is people go, oh, I need to figure out like what's wrong with this contract. And it's a really interesting question. It's really a question of like, there's a 100-page document that we know we have to read, and we want to focus on the parts that are more likely to be issues first. And when that happens, usually what lawyers do is they'll run a red line to the documents they had in the past. And those red lines, if it's on the same base, then you're able to get something that's really sensible. But if it's not in the same base, it's all going to be reds and blues. And we try and solve for that problem first. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a little bit. And the second problem then is, okay, now you've figured out like what changed and therefore what might be issues. You have to revise and provide your comments. And that's where we can tap into the work that the firm has done before to boost the knowledge, to give you more certainty as to like, if we've negotiated and drafted this and it's been accepted by the other side before, maybe you should push that point again. And so it's that kind of comprehensiveness. And I'll also show you a little bit of what we've got on the roadmap coming up, because we've just released what we call Generation 3 of our software. And it's pretty exciting. It's a completely different approach to how we can utilize the content and knowledge inside of law firms to solve multiple pain points that transactional lawyers have. A little bit like Anthony, we're not really focused on litigation yet. It is something that we get asked about a lot, and the answer is one thing at a time. So let's help out our transactional lawyer friends first. And in case you're wondering, like, how did I get into this space? It's completely by accident. And I'll share more about that at the end if anyone's interested. But first, let's get on with sharing my screen and you guys can see what we've got going on. So on my screen, and before I share my screen, I'll actually put up a good starting point. On my screen, what you should see very, very shortly is one of those red-lined documents. This is a comparison of two different credit agreements. It was a deal that when it switched over from LIBOR to SOFR, someone made all these amendments to a credit agreement, and you can see like they've made changes that make sense. That as a transactional lawyer working on credit agreements every day, you know why they changed LIBOR to SOFR. You know why they might have deleted immaterial subsidiaries. All of these little changes are perfectly rational once you've isolated the things that are different. And it's this exercise of isolating the risks, isolating the differences. Once upon a time, I was talking to someone from Slaughter MA, and she said, the most impactful technology for transactional lawyers in the last 20 years was redlining. And I think this is exactly why. It means I don't have to go through and read incremental facility, incremental joinders, et cetera, because I know it didn't change. I'm familiar with the previous deal. Now, in the 20% of deals that you work on where you do have a good starting point, this is what you get. And you get enormous efficiencies. And it's really nice. And it's what we all want as a transactional lawyer. But in the 80% of cases where you don't have the perfect starting point, or where your starting point is just completely different because it's drafted by a different firm or a different client on a different base, what you get is something that looks like this. And this is two other credit agreements. And you can see by the loading time it takes that there are a lot of changes. And even as I scroll down the page, and this is real time, by the way, of how slow it is, it's all reds and blues. And you end up, as a lawyer, having to read it all from scratch anyway, because all of it is different. And you end up eyeballing for changes. Did I have this definition? Was affiliates the same? Well, they use different wording, so I'm going to have to read it all from scratch. Did they change the participation in letter of credit? Do they even have that clause? I have to read it from scratch. And that's a painstaking exercise, and it takes hours and hours and hours. And it happens a lot. It happens at the start of every deal. It happens when you're doing due diligence. It's a constant theme. So transactional lawyers spend that time revising and looking at differences, looking at what are the risks. So what we came up with was a technology that's able to automatically break down these documents clause by clause by clause, and then rearrange their provisions so the same ones are lined up before we run a red line. And we can do that without needing them to use the same language. And what you end up with is you end up with a really neat little table that has clauses on the left-hand side from your source document, clauses on the right-hand side from the document that you're comparing it against, and it tells you, hey, for your sale and purchase of shares in this SPA, here's the equivalent purchase and sale of purchase shares, and it tells you how close they are in meaning, how close they are in drafting, and you can switch on the red line to see, well, it's actually really, really different. But you've been able to align the same provisions together to know, yes, you have a purchase provision, and you can scroll down and go, well, we also have a transfer of beneficial ownership, and it reads like this. It's buried inside the reps and warranty clause. And so you can actually see these things that previously would have taken you hours and hours to do. And it's this enormously helpful tool that we can give to transactional lawyers for the purposes of analyzing and spotting differences. Now, this Excel table is really something that I think would make sense after you see it a few times, because it is a departure from the Word document. But if your starting point is a red and blue jumbled mess, this is a much, much bigger step up than just trusting that the process got it right in Microsoft Word. So one of the other things that I'll show you in a second that's special about this is all of these provisions that have been extracted and rearranged have been done with no pre-training. So I didn't need to go into the system and teach it, this is a taxes clause, this is a closing deliverables clause, this is whatever clause. All of this has been done automatically by the system. And it's a comprehensive extraction of the clauses. And what that means is, in the old world where you have the keywords and luminances, etc., if you don't have a pre-trained model, it's not going to pick up that clause. But in our universe, we can pick up those clauses, and we're able to say, hey, you don't have an equivalent of a knowledge of the seller's provision. And if you scroll down, you'll see there are provisions in the document you're comparing it to, like, for example, conduct of business, that weren't found in your original purchase agreement. So these gaps, these issues that previously would have been really hard to find, now they're spotlighted for you in this red cell that you can look at and go, maybe we should insert a conduct of business clause to make sure that there's no leakage of funds between signing and closing. Really powerful stuff that historically would have taken a lot of time to figure out. But that's just what we call stage one, the ability to compare one document against another document. Where it becomes really, really useful is I can actually compare one document against up to 4,000 documents. And what that means is you now have a view of the market. And here's what it looks like when you have multiple documents. You have your base document on the left-hand side, split down clause by clause by clause by clause. And then all the other documents you're comparing against are on the right-hand side. So you can see here, for example, if I pick up a definition, the sale and purchase of shares, it's found the equivalent provisions in all of the other agreements, and it's arranged for you how similar they are and also where they're found, and the degree of similarity is shaded in different colors. So in real time, you can see, okay, for the purchase price provision, which hopefully exists in every single share purchase agreement, you can see who is the most similar and who is the least similar, arranged from top to bottom. Now, interestingly, these documents seems to have failed. So it even tells you, like, this document that is 69% similar to your original probably was an amendment to a share purchase agreement rather than an actual share purchase agreement, because there is no purchase price clause. So you're able to spot these kind of gaps. You're able to spot the market of where the differences are. And now when you're negotiating, you can say, well, for all of my deals where we have an allocation of payments clause, it's allocated in a certain way. You're different, and here's why. It's a really grounded and data-centric approach to negotiation. You're not relying on the experience that you've kind of put together in the last 20 years, or rather, not just the experience you've put together in the last 20 years, but now you have a data-centric way of saying, here are the last 20 deals that we did, or in this case, the last 9 deals that we did, and what they've agreed to in each case. And it's a really powerful tool for lawyers, because historically that's always been in the heads of partners, and it's always been really fuzzy. And now you can print this out as an Excel spreadsheet and go, I can pinpoint exactly which deals agree to what terms. And by selecting different documents, you get different insights. So it's a really flexible tool. And that's what we mean when we're saying we help lawyers figure out what might be problems and issues in the documents they're working on. Now, one of the use cases for this that has gained a lot of traction in the last 12 months is for funds and assets management teams, because funds and assets management teams work on side letters a lot. And side letters are those deal documents that investors kind of negotiate off to the side, and it's got special terms for them. It's different from the rest of the transaction. And so every single one is slightly different. But because it's negotiated with the same funds, even though the totality of these side letters are different, the topics inside of them are very similar. So what we can do is we can take these side letters and go, right, which LP has agreed to which terms? And all of a sudden, we've now rearranged all these provisions in a really meaningful way and given you a red line. The offset of fees is pretty much the same for everybody, but everybody has a slightly different right to information clause. And that most favored nation analysis, that gaps analysis, that variance analysis, depending on the document set you've selected, lets you hone in on exactly the issues. Now, there's other kind of applications for this, but in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of pause it there and talk about the other aspect of this tool, which is, now that you've figured out this rights to information clause is a little bit weird, a little bit off, how do we fix it? So we have a word add-in, and this word add-in looks like this. So if I say I am going to choose my side letters database, which is here, and by the way, it's all working off the same database. So when you're tapping into it for analysis, you can tap into the same thing for drafting. I can go right to information for the investor to be provided promptly. Something, right? You can use natural language for search, and it's a really powerful way of, I know I've drafted something like this before. It's on a past deal. What exactly did I say? I can then do a search, which would then bring back from my database, here are my rights to information clause and disclosure rights, most favored nation rights, and it depends on what words I put in. So here's the clause I want, the disclosure rights clause. So I can prompt the machine in real time to say, give me more like this one, please. And less like the most favored nation clause, because that's not what I want. So when I go down and load more, it's able to retrieve for me things that I've actually prompted them to bring back in real time. Timely delivery of closing documents, comprehensive information rights, drag, drop, and there is my information rights clause. It's that method of, not only can we help you figure out this is an issue to focus on, but this is how you've resolved that issue in the past. Now that is if I use this natural language phrasing. I don't have to use natural language phrasing. I can use more rigid search methodologies. And a lot of times lawyers are looking for more rigid search methodologies because lawyers want to be exact. They want to be precise. They want to have consistent results. So we give you the ability to use the full text for search. Now, let's say I changed this. I didn't say comprehensive. I deleted like a sentence back here. And I even got typos in there. When I click the workspace I want to choose, which is the side letters workspace, I can then find suggestions for language that is very, very close to what I put in. And here you can see it brought back comprehensive information rights, and it even shows you this is how what you've put in differs from what's in your database. This is that document itself. You can read the full text of the document. And if you want to, you can also click and see more information about who are the parties, etc., which are all automatically extracted. It's arm lawyers with enough information so that they can go and do their job of negotiating. They can go and do their job of figuring out, like, what should I do to fix the issue that I've found from the super comparer tool? So there's a lot more to both of these, but I'm not going to like delve into them. Instead, I'm going to show you a little bit about the future path, because I mentioned at the start of the call that we've just released our generation 3. And so this interface that you're seeing is actually the administrator interface that most users don't get to see. And on this, you can see the way we are approaching the problem of using content and accessing content for lawyers is to give them very specific mini apps. And these mini apps are down here. So the search is just one primary use case, but there's a lot more to that. You can load a precedent document. You can browse through your taxonomy. You can detect anomalies. And this is what we're really excited about, because detecting anomalies is the bringing together of the two technologies. And we'll be launching that hopefully before June, where inside of Microsoft Word, when you're working on a live document, say you're working on this credit agreement, you can say, I want to compare this against 10 of my precedents that I've worked on, and now figure out for me what might be an anomaly statistically by looking at all those 10 previous deals. And you can do that with no pre-training. It's just pick your 10 documents and let the machine run the analysis for you. And it gives you this grounded analysis on real data. Everything I've discussed so far doesn't use generative AI. So you know the words were actually found on the page somewhere. And it's very easy to trace back to exactly where it's found, what documents were used. And it's that reliability that we want to focus on. Of course, you can integrate this with Gen AI, but I'm not going to talk about that today. And it's the ability to like create that database, to use that database for comparison, for analysis, for MFN, for searching, for drafting. It's that kind of central pool of knowledge that I think a lot of transactional lawyers have always wanted. We're trying to give them not just that pool of reliable knowledge, but multiple tailored ways of tapping into it. So with that, I'm going to take a pause and see if there's any questions. Would love to answer anything that you guys have. And Cheryl, I'll hand back to you at this point. Reason why in the generation 3 of our software, we've gone with the mini apps approach of like really targeted user interfaces for specific use cases or specific groups. Because what we found, for example, is, and I didn't show you this in the demo, but for the funds and assets teams, one of the things that they do all the time is put together compendiums of side letters. And even though that Excel spreadsheet style view gives you that data, they don't want to see it. They want to see it in a Word output. So there's a different app that we give them that lets them download that compendium as a Word document that can be circulated to customers and clients directly. And it's that kind of like last mile coverage that lawyers need. It's not about just getting the information, the data, which is great for innovation teams and KM teams. But when a lawyer's practicing, they're saying, just give it to me. Just give me what I need. Don't make me jump through hoops. And so it's that kind of mentality of how do we give them something they need in the shortest, most efficient way.
Yeah, and there's 2 questions that have popped in. And one, Horace refers to side letters. So it says the side letter use case sounds like such a time saver. Have you worked with a firm to specifically measure ROA? on the software compared to manual creation of the MFN compendium?
Yes, I can give you two statistics. I cannot name the firms. One firm came to us and said, we found a 30x improvement. I don't know what 30x means. I'm guessing it's 60 hours down to 2 hours. Another firm said to us, one associate used to spend 45 hours a week doing this. They now spend 5 hours a week.